Despite what the experts think, Missouri's Brady Cook is a lot closer to Georgia's Carson Beck than they would lead you to believe. Let's talk about that and more right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. On today's program, I want to talk about how Week 0, the Florida State opening loss, may actually help Missouri a little bit more than you're thinking at first glance. Plus, I have to admit, I slept on receiver recruit Shaun Terry when talking about the receiver room of the future. I'm going to rectify that mistake here later in the program. First, I want to start by telling you that Ultimate College Football HC is a brand new mobile game that is completely free, has no ads, and 100% playable offline. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Begin your coaching legacy today. And I want to begin the program by saying that, yes, at first glance, there really isn't much of an argument for Brady Cook against Georgia's Carson Beck. In fact, the statistics, if you're just a box score watcher, well, they all favor Beck, the traditional and the advanced stats, quite honestly. Although both guys did each throw 6 interceptions last season, and Beck did just have a slight edge with 24 touchdown passes to Cook's 21. Just in terms of physical talent as well, Beck is the taller player, the stronger armed player. Every bit as mobile, I would say, as Cook as well. And if you look at ESPN's Field Yates, by the way, he recently got a few Mizzou goats when his 2025 NFL mock draft had Luther Burden going only 19th in that particular draft, I believe, to the Los Angeles Rams. Well, also notably, he had Carson Beck going number 1 overall. As you might imagine, Brady Cook did not appear in that first round mock draft. Now, a bunch of things to keep in mind here. First of all, just a slight digression here. Anybody getting really upset at Field Yates for having Burden only going 19th? Well, Yates himself in the piece says, wow, this feels too low for Burden. I have him 13th overall on my own board. So again, 2025, I'm old enough to remember a time when Drew Lock was the early number 1 overall draft pick of, I believe, Todd McShay, maybe a year or so out, that type of deal. McShay famously hates doing those year-out mock drafts for the very reason that so much can change in that amount of time. But back to the original argument here, Beck versus Cook. Now, here's the thing. Again, all the stats would seemingly favor Carson Beck. But I think we can all agree with one thing. Despite my love for the Missouri Tigers, I think most of us would agree, certainly Georgia fans who are probably coming here to argue with me right now, even Georgia fans would agree that Georgia has a better roster than Missouri. Top to bottom, there is more talent, more ability, more skill with the Georgia Bulldogs who've lost, 2 games in the past 3 seasons or something like that. I think that's a pretty fair thing to say at this moment, as much as I love the Missouri roster right now. So, because your teammates, your scheme, your coaching staff, all that good stuff, that all has such an impact on your results as a quarterback, well, how do we even this out a little bit? To me, the most fair way to do it, hey, I love the stats over at secstatcat.com. So you can break down all of these stats with a million different variables, including, hey, the down and distance, the score, the time left in the game, red zone, between the 20s, a million different variables here. To me, the simplest one we can do here is just add under pressure. Click yes. I just want to see what everybody's stats are when they're under pressure versus standing there with a clean pocket. Well, under pressure, all of a sudden, Brady Cook and Carson Beck, their numbers look a lot more comparable. You see, Cook's adjusted yards per attempt when under pressure, 5.5, whereas Beck's a little bit less than that, even at 5.3. So very, very similar, although Cook statistically slightly better. I would say, really, in a true statistical analysis there, that is even for all intents and purposes. Now, here's the real note here. Both guys go from about, high 60s to low 70s in Beck's case. He's about a 72% completion guy overall. I believe Cook was 66, 67, something like that last season. Well, then they go from that to under pressure. Cook is just under 40% as a passer. He completes about 39.7% of his passes when under pressure. Cook even a little bit worse at 35%. So again, I'm not trying to really make the argument that Brady Cook is better than Carson Beck. That's not really a hill that I want to die on. The hill that I'm wanting to die on here is that the difference between these two is really not nearly as much as you might think. If you're an NFL draft follower and you see that Carson Beck at this point is, at least according to one guy, Field Yates, whose opinions I certainly respect, has him going number 1 overall, you might think, well, come on. Brady Cook is more of like, hopefully he's a drafted 5th, 6th round, maybe undrafted free agent kind of guy. Maybe he is. But in college football, I'm just telling you right now, when they're under pressure, they're basically the same guy as passers, statistically. That tells me a lot. Just that one variable really does tell me quite a bit. And it tells me that Brady Cook, by the way, you compare them to the rest of the league, Cook and Beck were back-to-back, basically, in terms of how good they were under pressure on that particular adjusted yards per attempt stat. Well, by far, number 1 in the league in that stat last year was Jaden Daniels, to probably nobody's shock, the Heisman Trophy winner, now with the Washington Commanders. Well, by the way, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys, including Jaden Daniels, who were all better under pressure than Cook and Beck. So that does tell me that both guys have room to grow in that particular area of the game. And by the way, again, you go from 65, 70% as a passer down to 35, 40% as a passer when you're under pressure. If you've ever wondered why coaches and podcasters like me, for example, spend so much time focusing on edge rushers and just getting pass rush in general, well, there it is. That's why those guys make $1 bajillion. That's why Aldon Smith, he kept getting chance after chance after chance. Because why? You get to the quarterback, you win football games. You make it a lot easier. The stats just bear that out so obviously in the case of Brady Cook and Carson Beck. So just to recap, once again, I'm not really trying to make the case that Brady Cook is far better than Carson Beck or anything like that. I just think that the difference between those two is not nearly as big as the conventional wisdom would suggest. And I think that those under pressure numbers suggest that I'm right. I really do. So disagree with me all you want, Dogs fans. I'd love to see you in the comments. But speaking of other programs and speaking of Georgia, well, Georgia didn't quite make the college football playoff last season, and neither did the Florida State Seminoles. And, well, the Noles didn't get off to the best start yesterday in Week 0, losing in Ireland to Georgia Tech in an entertaining ball game. And I got to say, this does help Missouri a little bit, but it's not so much about being ahead of Florida State. It's really about the conference itself, and I want to explain exactly what I'm talking about here in just a second. But first, let's talk about Ultimate College Football HC. And hey, Locked On Mizzou fans, I just want to take a moment to give you a heads up about the brand new mobile game that I think you're going to love, Ultimate College Football HC. Can you imagine actually being the head coach of the Missouri Tigers, from recruiting players to hiring a coaching staff, overseeing training camps, and handling school scholarships? You control every crucial detail of your program. It's all in your hands. Will you be able to handle the pressure? Here's what I really love about the game. You're responsible for calling offensive plays during the games. Your strategy will not only determine the success of your season, but it will shape the future and legacy of your program. And I also, from my personal experience, this game is so much fun because it's only offensive plays. Defense is really fun to actually play on a video game. The simulation part, to me, they made the absolute right call here. And of course, we have a special offer for Locked On Mizzou fans. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost for your program. Make sure to take advantage of this perk, as it will get your team off to a great start. So download the game. Just visit ultimate-cfb.com. ultimate-cfb.com. Look it up on the app stores. Ultimate College Football HC. Begin your coaching legacy today. College football is officially back, and it's not too late to catch up before week 1 kicks off. SEC, ACC, Big 10, Big 12, all these previews from Locked On stable of college experts. Just subscribe to the Locked On College Football podcast on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. Of course, I'm on the SEC preview, and I just really think all 4 of these shows are wildly entertaining and informative. To me, it's the best national perspective you're going to get on the entire nation from your local experts. That's what we do here at Locked On. I think you're going to really enjoy it. Again, check it out. Subscribe to Locked On College Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. And Florida State. Speaking of the Locked On Network, you know, my old buddy, the Scoutmaster, he's also the host of Locked On Seminoles, Brian Smith, of course. I haven't checked on his emotional well-being today after that disappointing loss to Georgia Tech to start the season. Well, the Noles now heading a little bit to the back of the line now, the number 10 team in the country, and this does help Missouri a little bit marginally. And it's not so much about Florida State, although it is nice that the Tigers will likely slide ahead of the Noles, of course, in the AP poll, for example, here in the next week or so. But really, to me, it's more about the conference itself and not about any specific team, much less Florida State, because if Missouri is going to be on the margins of the college football playoff, I mean, hey, hopefully the Tigers go 13-0 and win the SEC or the number 1 overall seed. We won't have to worry about any of this. But more than likely, the Tigers are going to lose a game at some point, perhaps even 2 games. And of course, if the Tigers are 10-2, that's when Missouri fans are going to get nervous. So if we're on that line of being the 10-11 seed or possibly being the first team out of the college football playoff, what Missouri wants, in my opinion, is for the ACC and the Big 12 to be just a jumbled up mess. So it's great, in my opinion, if Florida State and Miami and Clemson, I hope they're all mediocre, more or less. So that way, only one ACC team gets in. And hopefully one Big 12 team as well. Because again, if Florida State and Miami and Clemson, for example, if all 3 of those teams get into the playoff, well, there's a couple spots, or at least one, right? There'll probably be 2 ACC teams that get in, right? Maybe not. Hopefully just one, again, from a Missouri fan's perspective. So again, if 3 teams get in from the ACC or 3 get in from the Big 12 or something like that, obviously that's just fewer spots for our beloved SEC, where damn it just means more. And it means more to me if Missouri gets in the playoff. That's all I really care about. I'm all for, of course, the future health of college football and all that good stuff, and I'll probably talk even more about that here in a minute. But for this season, all I really care about is Missouri getting in the playoff and hopefully winning the SEC as well. So the ACC and the Big 12 can be damned. I'm assuming the Big 10 and the SEC are going to get probably at least 4 teams in the playoff most years. So the ACC and the Big 12, the non-champions, are really going to be fighting for the scraps there. So hopefully, again, if you're a non-champion of the SEC or the Big 10, I think you've got to be hoping that the ACC and the Big 12 is just a mess, a jumbled up mess on an annual basis. That gives your teams on the margins a better shot to get in. In a recent episode, I went in depth on the Missouri receiver room, the current room, and also the future of the position as well. But as viewer Thomas Sharp rightly points out, he says, by the way, the Terry kid, being Shaun Terry, though he's a 3-star for now, don't sleep on him. Was, I believe, a Notre Dame commit before us. That's true, by the way. Big offers and big highlights. Already tearing it up this year. May end up higher than Javen Boggs, who took a big fall in the latest rankings. Well, I'm not going to really speak to the high school rankings there, but what I will say for sure is that, yeah, that was an omission on my part for sure. Shaun Terry is a real talent. I've been so focused on Javen Boggs and Donovan Olubade, I think he just slipped my mind a little bit. But that is a mistake for sure, because what you say is absolutely true there, Thomas Sharp, because Terry is a big-time explosive playmaker, a guy with real talent. You watch him play high school ball at Ironton, Ohio. By the way, what an incredible name for a Rust Belt town. Does it get better than Ironton? I don't think so. But regardless, Terry is so explosive, and he's so much more explosive than the guys he's playing with. I mean, his highlights are comedic. They really are. They're hilarious because he is, breaking 2 tackles and then cutting all the way across the field multiple times and then running into the end zone. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that he's going to need to run a little bit more north and south at Missouri in the SEC for sure. But regardless, the guy just has obvious explosive athletic talent. Being a former Notre Dame commit tells you the level of talent there for sure. And yeah, I'm really excited to see what Shaun Terry does in a Missouri uniform. Although I will say, as a true freshman, I'm not really expecting him to compete for a ton of snaps, at least in the receiver room. However, I will say, again, with his explosive nature, could he help out in the return game as a true freshman? I certainly can't rule that out. And recently on the program, I talked about how I like to see my quarterbacks. If I'm a football coach, I want to see Brady Cook or whoever my quarterback is pushing the envelope in practice, pushing the line, going over the line, throwing some bad interceptions that at least look bad in practice, maybe to the casual viewer. But in reality, the casual observer, you're just trying to find that line. And I think I sort of was being a little hyperbolic when I said, hey, the more the merrier with practice interceptions. Obviously, that's a little over the top, but I was trying to make a point there. And on pushing the envelope in practice, well, Terry Brunk, a viewer, says, looked that way against Ohio State. The touchdown pass to Luther Burden was thread the needle type. Confidence his receiver would catch it. I think that's a great point and a perfect example of what I was getting at, which is that pass. That's the type of pass that if Brady Cook hesitates for even a moment, and if he doesn't throw that with basically as much velocity as he can from about 10 yards away there, the ball's not caught. It doesn't have an opportunity to be caught. And by the way, what an incredible catch by Luther Burden as well. Talk about soft hands at a really clutch moment by an incredible player. I mean, the more you look at that pass and that catch, obviously the moment that Missouri basically seals the victory with that touchdown, putting the stamp on the 11-win season, the Cotton Bowl championship, that really is one of the great plays in Missouri history, the more you think about it. The moment, the opponent, the season, the ability that it took on both ends of that play, the throw and the catch. Just great stuff, and a great point there by Terry Brunk, as that is a good example of exactly what I was getting at in terms of pushing the envelope in practice at quarterback. But first, let's talk about Gametime, the place to get last-minute tickets, including to, of course, the Missouri-Murray State game this week. Hey, Gametime also has a new feature I'd like to tell you about called Gametime Picks that makes it even easier for getting tickets to your favorite live events. Gametime Picks filters out all the fluff and shows you only incredible deals on seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. In fact, right now, some great deals on Gametime, including their super deal. You can sit in section 103 for $28 with their all-in pricing. Be sure to toggle all-in pricing, by the way, when you're searching for on Gametime, so you'll always know the fees, your final cost up front. One of my absolute favorite features of Gametime, the best place to get last-minute tickets, whether it is Mizzou games, concerts. I'm telling you, you got to take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Clearly, the easy way to return, or at least preserve, I should say, the importance of conference championships while having an expanded college football playoff, having both, well, quite simply, you need to get rid of the conference championship games. Oh, except here's the problem. Because we now have 16 teams in the SEC, I believe 18 teams in the Big Ten, well, now you really can't do that anymore. You now have such an unbalanced schedule that you almost have to have an SEC and Big Ten championship game. So the other solution on top of that is, hey, let's shrink the conferences back down to their original sizes of, say, 8 to 10 teams, a much more manageable amount where basically all the teams will then play each other each and every season. But of course, that's not going to be happening, at least anytime soon, until we have some, I don't know, merger of the Big Ten and the SEC and all the major conferences or something like that. Even then, that's a fantasy world that is probably a long ways off. But listener David Beal says, I'll give you a curveball. I'd like to see the SEC teams that make the 12-team playoff be excluded from the SEC championship game. Instead, call it the SEC Bowl and let it be the top 2 teams left. I'll remind you the Chiefs don't play an AFC West championship game, for example. I don't think it is fair or in the players' best interest to play in a 16th game of the season to win the national championship. Well, one thing, it could actually be a 17th game. If you lose that game and then make it all the way to the finals of the college football playoff, you would in fact play 17 games in a college football season. Somebody's going to do that at some point here in the next few seasons. So I do agree that there is a bit of it. That's one of the big problems here, is that obviously there's a conflict of interest here in terms of, well, obviously we want to win the SEC, but we want to win the playoff too. So I don't know. Again, this whole idea of, hey, I like novel ideas, novel approaches, all that good stuff. But again, the SEC Bowl, who would want to actually play in that is the problem. Again, if the problem is, oh, we're lessening the importance of this game and players are going to sit out, well, you want to talk about a lot of opt-outs. You're going to be seeing basically walk-ons playing in the SEC Bowl. So I appreciate the idea. I'm not quite sure that dog hunts. But not everybody agrees with me on the importance of conference championships. I will say that. I've gotten a lot of disagreement with people saying, hey, it's all about the playoff. Forget about it, including the aforementioned listener. But you know what? J-Rob agrees with me, by golly, and he says, you know what? You nailed it. That should be the main goal. Winning SEC championships gives you the most legitimate shot at a national championship, And that's why it irritates me when guys say this format weakens the importance of conference championship games. It does the opposite. It makes them way more important. I agree with that. I think your teams are looking at it the wrong way. If you are saying that is the good part about this format, the bye format of the 12-teamer, and that would be a concern of mine if they expand to 16. Well, then there's no bye formats. Now you've really taken away a huge incentive. For example, an undefeated Texas or Georgia or Missouri. If any of those teams, or any team, it doesn't matter, say Missouri's undefeated, they're definitely going to be in the college football playoff. They're definitely going to be one of the top 4 seeds, let's say, in a 16-team format where there are no byes. That type of deal doesn't necessarily matter what your seed is. I can see more of the argument there. But in a 12-team format, boy, getting that bye, getting a top seed still really matters quite a bit. Of course, I've seen a lot of people, including myself, have pointed out, the 5 seed is not so bad. You get to host that first round game, number 1, and more often than not, you're going to be playing the group of 5 team that's probably not legitimately a real top 12 type of team in most years. So there is a real advantage there, but still, I think it's a bigger advantage, clearly, just to not have to play another game. Again, up to 16 or 17 games, that's just a long road to hoe for sure. So that's one reason why I'm against expanding to 16 right now. Let's see how this 12-team playoff format works out. And to me, securing those bye weeks helps secure and maintain the importance of conference championships. Let's just keep it at this format for now. That's just my opinion. But hey, I'd love to hear your opinions, as always, in the comments on YouTube. Hit me up on social media at Locked On Mizzou or lockedonmizzou@gmail.com. Appreciate your input, as always. So until next time, I am John Miller, and thanks for listening to Locked On Mizzou.